on this episode of Postcards.
It was, in a lot of ways, extremely cathartic, because you can go out there and you can make as much noise as you want, or be as quiet as you want.
It's like a drug. I go through stages where I don't work, and then all of a sudden I have to. It's something built inside of me that I have to do. It's this part of me.
This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. The Arrowwood Resort and Conference Center, your ideal choice for Minnesota resorts, offering luxury townhomes, 18 holes of golf, Darling Reflections Spa, Big Splash Water Park, and much more. Alexandria, Minnesota. Explore hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for a great vacation or a place to hold an event. ExploreAlex.com. Tri-State Brain and Spine Institute, with locations in Alexandria, Edina, Crookston, and Maple Grove. Doctors dedicated to evaluating and treating all types of brain and spine problems, no matter how complex.
When I was little, I used to tell people that this was my ocean. I told them I would give whoever needed it all my money so I could buy the entire prairie to keep it just like this. I didn't really know that somebody had already done that the year I was born.
We created a performance art piece that was site-specific and place-based specifically to Ordway Prairie. It involved a lot of storytelling, personal memoir, local legends and Dakota legends. We included the Fort Lake Johanna. It was a walking performance with a choir involved, as well as 5, sometimes 6 musicians. And it was about 1.5 miles of walking.
The show was a performance installation. It was also a storytelling nature walk, and it was also a musical performance. So it was kind of all these things, and it was a community event, I think, at the same time. So it was all these things combined.
When I thought about, well, what are the themes here, and having grown up here and been part of a family who's owned this property for a very long time, there was a lot of history to pull from. So I started searching for that history at the Glenwood, what is it called? The Pope County Museum, Historical Museum, and found out a lot about my relatives that I didn't know before, and some of those stories made it into the show. Some of them didn't. There were so many. Some of them took the shape of newspaper clippings and signs that were part of the trail as we walked.
I think it took about 9 months. The piece was never totally finished until it was presented. It was a moving thing the entire time. It didn't have a clear beginning, and it still doesn't have quite a clear end, even though the performance is finished. I think it lingers a lot with me.
I would say Thursday and Friday, before the weekend performances, this house was full of choir coming in and out, and they were camping. They were gracious enough to, and hardy enough to come out here for 4 days and camp in the backyard and at the lake, and come to rehearsals. And we rehearsed in the loft, we rehearsed in the front yard, we made a lot of noise right here in the living room. And musicians appeared one by one at different times, and we had a couple trombones, we had a folk harp, guitar player, James Everest, who also played harmonica, and myself, who played violin and accordion. And all of these people, it was about 34 people all together. So this house was full, just full, of everybody doing a lot of things all at once. So the coordinating was absolutely incredible. Like, everyone was so generous with their time. We invited local people to come and see our dress rehearsals, because within 3 weeks of putting it out there as tickets being available, they were sold out. So we had a lot of people who didn't get a ticket, and we said, well, we're going to have rehearsals on Thursday and Fridays, and you're welcome to come. So they started filtering in, and I loved that, because so much of the piece was about what kind of experience can we make for both audience and participants, musicians and choir, and the cast, that would be unique and be kind of specifically to help us reconnect to nature. And I think we did that.
The thing that makes Ordway special is the topography, really. Just how dramatic it is. People call it the Sunberg Alps. But I don't know if it's special because it's been preserved, and it's special because it hasn't turned into some other land. And in that way, it's special in its unspecialness.
Ordway Prairie is about 500 feet over there. It is, I think, over 650 acres of untouched prairie. I know some of it has been used in a land initiative experiment, so some of it is not untouched anymore, and that's very minimal, but for the most part, in general, it is original. It has never been plowed, never been grazed. So they do burns every year, a couple times maybe, so we have Nature Conservancy people right out the window quite often. But I can hear coyotes, I watch the deer. There's even been talk of a bear and a wolf. So it's beautiful. There's so many rolling hills. They call it a kind of patchwork or mosaic of wildflowers and grasslands and wetlands and forests, all in one little spot where a glacier just decided to stop. When we think of performance art, we think of a black box or a stage or a single platform. And here was this insane opportunity to put something together that happened a half a mile away, or on this hill, and then this hill, and then this hill. So some of my fondest memories are watching Ivan, one of the characters in the performance, in his red suit and red cape. And he would walk. He would just walk in a lot of, and he would take over all these different dimensions until he was so far away, but the red would just pop. And so you could see him from that distance. And then he would play a trumpet. So not only visually were we trying to make use of this scale, but sonically we also were trying to play a little bit with sound and what does it sound like when it's coming from that far away versus me right here talking to people, and how do we actually make it work. So I remember that because it was difficult. And we kept making Pori Ice run and run and run and run. I think he put in more miles than any of us.
My main role during the performance was as this character Bethany's mother had conceived when she was a child. We're not quite sure if it's a real person or not, but the name of this spirit was Ivan Bainlos. He was the spirit of the wind. Further on in the performance, I popped out from behind a tree, and I surprised everybody and was wearing a red suit and a cape, and gave a monologue about why Ivan can be your friend or your enemy, why the wind can be bad or good, I guess. And then eventually I just ran across the prairie and played trumpet at the end.
Stop! Who are you? What are you doing here? How did you get here? How did I get here? How did I get here? Ooh. I remember now. I recognize you. Come in here, come in. I see you've been playing the wind chimes. It's my job, you know. I play the wind chimes. I am Ivan Bainlos. I'm a god of the wind. I'm a wind spirit. I rap on your windows and I howl through the door cracks. Underneath the door, making a path directly to you for a cold or a pneumonia to follow. That's why a bed is so high off the ground. That's why I wear a scarf. No, we all wear scarves. That's why we wear a scarf and socks and hats. But I wouldn't be afraid. I'm just Ivan Bainlos, wind spirit, a god of the wind.
My favorite part of the performance was the private time I had when I was away from everyone else, walking through the prairie to the post that I would play trumpet for at the end of the performance. I had time to reflect, I guess, on the whole project, but also kind of could get out of my head and just listen to what was happening around me. The buzz of insects was really beautiful out there, and realizing I was learning about the prairie in a pretty unique way was my favorite part of it. And I think that's something audience members were able to experience too.
James Everest, who directed the piece and composed all the music, went through tons of rehearsals with an incredibly generous couple of choirs from the Twin Cities, the Prairie Fire Lady Choir and the Sacred Harp Singers from the Twin Cities. They all came out here, volunteered their time to learn how to sing in the prairie and to accompany stories that I was telling with my very quiet voice, and they were wonderful. It went from a visualization of this moving choir up and down the hills, to different players, a flute, bass flute, a harp. James would play guitar and harmonica throughout the walk, and had a very nice road crossing song that was kind of clever and funny.
I met the wind in his mustache, in the tall, tall grass.
Realizing that so much of the stories that were coming out that ended up in the performance were memories from childhood, from my mom, who had recently passed, and from my dad, who had passed 8 years ago. So rehearsals were insanely emotional, and I didn't always know how to, like, if I was gonna make it through. So it became almost kind of, I don't want to say memorial to my family or my parents, but in a lot of ways it really did address that. It really did do that for me. So I'm always wary of using art as therapy, but this kind of did that anyway. It was, in a lot of ways, extremely cathartic, because you can go out there and you can make as much noise as you want or be as quiet as you want. If I had to sum up the total experience of writing and creating and producing my ocean, gosh, in everything I've ever made, performance or music or any kind of collaboration, I've always tried to maintain that the process of making the work with the people who are part of it, making the work is akin to building those relationships.
Crisscross.
And in the end, quite honestly, if we would have canceled the show, if it would have rained out, I would have felt just as satisfied with the results, because I made so many friends and I got to know my neighbors. And people who had never met each other and are now still keeping in contact. So, so much of the work that I like to do is about building relationships, and not only with people but with the land. There were several people who came out here who had never seen a prairie, and now had the basis from which to move into learning more about nature and feeling connected to nature. So if I would sum it up, those were the things I tried to do, and I'm really happy because I think that the piece helped to do that.
Are you a fan of postcards? Follow us on your favorite social media platform to get the latest news on upcoming episodes, behind the scenes, and more.
I'm mainly a printmaker, working in the human form, studies of human form, figures, faces, trying to depict motion and emotion through Relief printmaking. There are many different forms of printmaking. I'm mainly a relief printmaker, where I carve into wood, linoleum. There's a new substance that I'm using right now called Sintra, and carve into the block and then relief print make. Put paper on top and ink on top of the block and put it through the press. I'm using a process right now called Chincolet, which is a way to add color to the print, to black or white print, by gluing tissue paper to the main backing paper and printing the ink prints on both the tissue paper and the main backing paper. The favorite piece of artwork I ever did is a print that I did in college. It was called a monoprint. It was my first printmaking class, and it was probably the fourth print that I ever did. And it was the minute that I knew I could be an artist. It's hanging in the living room. There was a series of 4, sold the other 3, and the buyer bought all 3 of the previous ones. And he wanted the 4th one, and I wouldn't sell it. It's the minute I knew I could be an artist if I wanted to survive as an artist. The project that I'm working on now is I received a Minnesota Legacy grant for approximately $9,000. It incorporates a steamrolling event where children make a print and then they put the paper on top of it and run over it with a street roller and get a print out of it. And the second part of the project is for my own personal artwork to put on 2 shows next year, one at the Cadets Gallery and one at the PRCA in Morris, the Prairie Renaissance Cultural Alliance in Morris, Minnesota. And my goal is to work big, do big prints anywhere between 4 and 8 feet long, possibly put 2 or 3 of them together where they incorporate something that's 16 feet high, 24 feet long, things like that. So that's doing what I like to do on a large scale. Working with a steamroller, it's something you don't see every day. I mean, it's a way to, when you print make, you use paper and pressure, ink, paper and pressure, and it's a great way a different way to see it done. What inspires me about working with the kids is they usually don't get introduced to printmaking in school. And they're usually painting or drawing if they do take an art class. Some of the art classes are caught in school that they don't get much art, and they usually never get to see printmaking done. So this is a way to really inspire them in a different way and be creative in a different way too. It's maybe taking something that's an everyday object that they see on the street, rolling tar and building roads and things like that, and say we can use it in something different and use it in a creative, artistic way. I think that's the most impressive. The kids really get impressed by something like that. It's big machinery, rolling over, creating art. There's so many different types of printmaking. There's etching, silkscreen, relief cut, lithography, and things like that. I think the thing that sets me apart is I use a lot of those techniques in different ways and actually sometimes combine them all. The other thing is the Chincolet technique. I've not seen anyone in this area use it at all. In this area, to be an artist, I think it's in a whole, Minnesota supports the artists with money as a whole. I think, being able to have access to grants and venues to do art, especially being in Fergus, near Fergus Falls. The Lake Regions Arts Council is a great supporter of the arts. Springboard for the Arts is one of the Minnesota art organizations in Minnesota, and they chose to put one of their satellite offices in Fergus Falls. So I think being out here, especially near Fergus Falls, with the art community in Fergus Falls it's very nice to be out here in this area working as an artist. With the steamroller printing, the kids will do a print on a piece of cardboard. We have a sticky, tacky substance that gives it a relief, and the kids cut out cut out their object or their print or things like that and stick it to the cardboard. Then they bring it to the inking station and the artist inks the plate, and we lay the plate down on the board with paper on it, and the steamroller rolls over across and they get a print. I'm gonna try to get them to incorporate a nature theme so it fits with the show that I'm working on and things like that. My show at the Cadets is, I'm thinking more of a nature type thing. The garden, I'm fascinated by the Garden of Eden theme. So I'm gonna try to get the kids to work in more of a natural form, do trees, leaves, things like that. But obviously they can do anything they want. They're the creative ones, and I don't want to limit their creativity and what they're able to do with their print, so. My career as an artist has taken me, it's really been on hold for a few years, raising kids, things like that, and I really got back into it the last couple of years. And it's really gone really well the last few years. Even this year, I've done 25 shows across the nation, been accepted to 25 juried shows. It's able to just expand my career and my visibility as an artist, being able to show in that many venues in the cities, a couple of gallery associations in the cities, things like that. And I'd like to see my career just build towards retirement, so when my business career ends, that my art career picks up and I'm able to cross over into being a full-time artist. It's like a drug. I go through stages where I don't work, and then all of a sudden I have to. It's something in me. It's something built inside of me that I have to do. And the older I get, the more I have to do it. It's this part of me.
Have an idea for postcards? Send your story suggestions to postcards@pioneer.org. This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. The Arrowwood Resort and Conference Center, your ideal choice for Minnesota resorts, offering luxury townhomes, 18 holes of golf, Darling Reflections Spa, Big Splash Water Park, and much more. Alexandria, Minnesota. Explore hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for a great vacation or a place to hold an event. ExploreAlex.com. Tri-State Brain and Spine Institute, with locations in Alexandria, Edina, Crookston, and Maple Grove. Doctors dedicated to evaluating and treating all types of brain and spine problems, no matter how complex.